when I was at SEAL Team 6, we had a command psychologist, and nobody ever went to go see the guy because you were afraid of what would happen. You were afraid of the repercussions of the command finding out and you being taken off of, the roster, right? That was a certified fear. And I remember I ran into the command psychologist in the gym one day, and we're just BSing, and I always like to give the guy crap. And he actually said something to me on a serious note. And he said, "You know what? Because I've probably got the worst job in the command." He says, "I don't see anybody all day long because none of you guys want to come in and see me." And I'm like,
Oh,
"Well, no, we don't." Because, we don't want the repercussions of, what we say to you going to, the leadership, and then the leadership saying, "Wow, this guy needs some help. Let's take him out."
right.
And then I've watched interviews of these veterans that almost to the man, they have said, "I've been struggling my entire life since the time I got out of the military. And because of my experiences, I've been struggling my entire life.
Oh,
And I wish the resources were available that, of what the veterans have now." And so it's there's stoicism, and then there's just packing it all down and just keeping it down, and it's not healthy for the human body.
yeah.
It's not healthy at all for that. And not to mention, the psychology of everybody else around you. It's, there's the impact is enormous to family members and even friends. And
Mm.
if anybody ever feels that need that they need to reach out, swallow whatever pride you have and take advantage of it because it's going to open new doors in your personal relationships.
Welcome back to the Wounds to Wisdom podcast. I want to give a shout out to Denny Caballero and Security Halt Media for producing this mini series. I'm interviewing 29 of the authors for our book, Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives. And these are all protectors who have hit that trauma time in their life and they have been able to navigate out, and they have the generosity to share their stories with other protectors who are suffering in silence. And today I'm so happy to be able to have a conversation with Steve Giblin. He is a retired United States Navy SEAL, Master Chief, and he's also the author of Walking in Mud, a Navy SEAL's 10 Rules for Surviving the New Normal. I have read the book, and it just a lot of wisdom in there. So I appreciated knowing that. So Steve, thank you again for coming on. And I would love to just dig into kind of where you began, your background, your upbringing, and what drew you to the military.
Yeah, so I grew up in nearby here in the next state over. I grew up in New Mexico. Uh, one year we moved to Long Island to help out my dad's parents, and then we moved back to Albuquerque, and then we moved to Hawaii for a year. And for my dad was going to try to start a business with an old Air Force buddy of his. So that experience in and of itself it just sort of opened my eyes to, a different world that's out there. Even though that experience in Hawaii only lasted about a year, and then we moved back to Albuquerque, it still sort of, I don't know, it woke something up inside of you. When you're a little kid and you grow up in your hometown or what have you, and it's sort of looking through a soda straw. And the only thing the only thing you've experienced is what's happened in that small town or big city, whatever your hometown is. And moving to another state, especially a place like Hawaii, and experience everything that had to offer, and then moving back, you realize that there's so much more out there. So I finished up high school, and I was really kind of I'm not going to say I was lost, but I wasn't motivated to go to any more school. I didn't want to go to college, and I had actually gone to trade school at nighttime trade school when I was in high school, my last 2 years of high school, and that was what I figured was what I was going to be doing, and I didn't mind it. I liked it. I liked the trades. Uh, by the time I'd graduated high school, I was a certified welder, auto body mechanic, and engine mechanic. But so I then went to work at one of the few places that would hire a 17-year-old, um, a 17-year-old mechanic, right? And it was 10 cents over minimum wage. When I'd gone and talked to the recruiter due to my dissatisfaction with where I was right then and there, I found out that I'd be making the exact same money, and but I would get 30 days paid vacation, and I'd get to travel and see the world. So that's what energized me to join the Navy. Just a couple of months after graduating high school, and a couple of months after starting, that job, I started that job in that shop just actually one day after high school
Oh,
finished
wow.
up.
No
So
break.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. You know what? Well, my dad encouraged me to not take a break, um, and he always emphasized work and hard work, and earning your keep.
Mhm.
So it wasn't necessarily the Navy that instilled that in me. It was my father a long time ago. And
Okay.
so I joined the Navy, and I discovered something that I didn't know was alive inside of me, and that was that spirit of adventure and just doing good hard work. I always knew it was there, and so I never failed at that. And
Mm.
I never had an issue with hard work in the military. My first assignment was on an aircraft carrier. We worked anywhere from 14 to 16-hour days, and I was fine with it. It suited me well. And being out at sea, there really wasn't anything else to do. So, that's all part of it. And the adventure, pulling into ports or being in different parts of the ocean. I was in the Pacific. I was stationed in San Diego, and we ended up in the Indian Ocean and just off the Arabian Peninsula as well. That was the farthest we went. But going to Australia, Singapore, the Philippines, places like that to me, that was a lot of fun. I had a
Mhm.
great time. And so from there, that bug had bit me. And I had applied to go to BUDS, to SEAL training. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you're hearing that or not. My alerts, I'm trying to turn them off. Um, so it just, the Navy was gracious enough to let me go and do this. And, the success rate was only about 90 or 10% success rate, 90% attrition rate. But I wanted to give it a shot. I thought I had a really good shot at it. And physically, I did. Physically, I didn't have a problem with any of the evolutions in BUDS. What really kicked my butt was academics, but I got a lot of help in that area. Depending on what course it was, uh, I got a lot of help with that from my classmates, guys that knew and understood several of the officers in my class, and so that they helped me out, and it was a genuine team effort, and that was
Mhm.
something that I grew to appreciate as well.
Mm.
So that was pretty much the beginning of it all.
That's so interesting. So as you progressed too, you ended up in SEAL Team 6, right? And that was for what,
Yes,
14 years?
that was. That
Okay.
was, and so you have to go to a SEAL team first before you end up going to SEAL Team 6, or what they call Dev Crew now. And you have to basically prove yourself at a team prior to, getting an assignment to SEAL Team 6. But what you have to go to then is the assessment and selection program, which at the time for me was 6 months, and I think it's still pretty much the same. So you go through another selection process, and it's that way with just about all the. It is that way with the Tier 1 units. Any of the units that fall under JSOC, you have an assessment and selection program that you have to go through, because not everybody is meant to, to work at those commands and to operate within those commands. And so that's one of the things that they want to see. And they also want to see a person's ability to, kind of change on the fly and adapt to their standard operating procedures, and making sure that you're flexible enough to be able to do those kind of things and operate within that kind of an environment. So that was another challenge. Again, physically, I didn't have a problem at all. Neither did any of my other teammates that were trying out for that as well. But still, um, there was an attrition factor to that as well. There were still guys that were told, hey, we don't we don't need you here at the command anymore, or maybe they had a safety violation or something like that, and something that they take very seriously.
Mm.
So, we started off with 27, ended up with 17, and then were distributed among the assault squadrons within SEAL Team 6. So that's pretty
Okay.
much how it goes on a year-to-year basis.
Oh, okay.
But the 14 years that I spent there were fantastic.
Mm.
And that's actually where I grew a lot.
Mm.
But you also are kind of isolated. You're not part of, or you don't really operate within the normal confines of everyday military, and you're somewhere out there in this other orbit, if you will, and making deployments, doing things under the direction from the commander of Joint Special Operations Command, who then also answers directly to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So it's a fairly short chain of command, and you find yourself actually doing things that other people aren't doing within
Mm.
our military structure. So you get supported by a lot of those people. But at the time when I was there, from 1987 to 2001, there were a lot of organizations, units, commands, bases overseas that did not understand. And it's who are all these guys that just landed on my airfield, and why is it
Mm.
that they need all this backside support, and why do they need it so fast? So it was always kind of running into issues like that. I think nowadays it's not anywhere near as bad as that, and with the global war on terrorism, that's really opened up to a whole nother way of operating in the world, and
Mm.
those guys are very much in the thick of it.
It's so interesting to me, as a civilian, I'm imagining your journey. So, you're a kid that goes in at 17. You obviously have a great work ethic from your dad. So, even before getting into the military, and then you have all these adventures. You love that, the traveling, all that sort of thing. You're tested like no person is tested on the planet, I'm sure, with not only just buds, but, also the assessment process for SEAL Team 6. So, okay, so I'm picturing this part of your journey. And I'd love for you to share two things. And that is, when you think back about your military time, what did you absolutely love about it? Like the first thing that comes up. And then as you transitioned, was there a time that was rock bottom? And maybe talk about that.
Sure. So being in the special operations community, you have a very distinct sense of tribe. Those commands that you're assigned to, those are your tribe. A lot of things that civilians, and when we say civilians, I know first responders understand. They get it. They belong to a tribe. And that's the closest thing you're going to find to the military is first responders, and it's it's really difficult to describe in the fact that you have to kind of split your relationships. If you're married, have kids, that's one set of it. And the other set is those people that you deploy forward with, the people that you train with, the people that you risk your life with every day. And that's a whole nother set, a whole nother family. And that just keeps on growing stronger the longer that you're in. And the more that you keep on getting deeper and deeper and deeper down into this. And I found that when it was time for me to retire, that the that anticipatory grief, if you will, of leaving, and
Mm.
trying to mentally prepare yourself to, leave something that you love. And I know there's plenty of people out there that are like, yeah, I'll be so glad when I'm done with all this. And, I'm never going to look back. I mean, I've talked to career people that have been like that. They were just ready to move on to the next step. And I invested myself wholeheartedly into the community, into my job. And when that decision had come, when it was time for me to retire, you just sort of get this, pit in your stomach
Mm.
of, my God, am I doing the right thing? And I really didn't have much of a choice in that. I was very senior. I was at 28 years. And I mean, the most I could have stayed in any longer was another 2 years. So, mentally preparing yourself for that departure from this tribe that you've been in part of for for me, it was at that point in time my entire adult life.
Mm.
I knew nothing else in my adult life. And so mentally preparing for that was very hard.
Mm.
And you just don't realize how hard it is until you've already jumped off of that train and you turn around and that train is gone. They just keep moving without you. And there's the missing of it. There's, you miss the deployments, you miss the train up, you miss just being around all those people, those like-minded individuals. And especially within a community as small as ours, at any one given time, there's probably between 2,500 and 2,800 SEALs in the community, period. East Coast,
Mm.
West Coast, globally. And it's not that big of a community. Um, and everybody, if you won't know everybody, but you travel in a lot of the same circles, and a lot of guys know a group of guys that and so
Mm.
there's always this common bond. And even to this day, I can link up with another retired SEAL, or just a former SEAL, somebody that didn't retire, and we've got a very common bond, starting with buds. And
Mm.
then depending on what teams you went to, it depends on how deep that bond goes. And having never met the person or even being separated by generations. When I retired, I was fortunate enough to be able to work for my community again as a civilian. And I think that helped my transition some. When it came to the point where I started running into my PTSD problems, and mental health problems from AAA type personalities, like in the SEAL teams, it's hard to acknowledge. I think hard is even an understatement.
Mm.
Extremely difficult to acknowledge. To admit that you're having problems that, especially, you don't know where it's coming from. All of my combat experience wasn't like what people see in the movies. My combat experience was very simple, very easy. In and out and back home again.
Mm.
For the most part, whether it was a month, whether it was 3 months or 6 months, it didn't matter. Everything was fine. I didn't have any traumatic events, not that I considered traumatic. Got small arms fire, rocket fire, mortars, things like that. But nobody died right in front of me. I wasn't involved in
Mm.
any helicopter accidents or aircraft accidents, things like that. So, when I say my experience wasn't as traumatic as other people, that's what I mean. But you still, there were other things that had happened in my career. I had, traumatic brain injuries from,
Mm.
you know, uh, all kinds of different training, from parachuting to, I had a rappelling accident where I was knocked unconscious. I
Mm.
had two parachute accidents where I was knocked unconscious, and then working with explosives at close quarters, meaning within a building, popping doors explosively. That explosive wave has nowhere else to go, and that has a direct impact on the human brain.
Mm.
And it creates tiny tears in the brain that you're not aware of. So all of these things piled on top of, at one particular point, and that was, for lack of a better word, that was my breaking point, I guess. It wasn't a catastrophic crash. where, I just curled up into a ball and, you know, sat there in a corner. It wasn't like that at all. But it was very disturbing to me. And my wife had noticed it, a change in my personality.
Mm.
Over time, actually, she had noticed it for quite some time. But there was this sort of feeling in the house that when I thought everything was okay, she knew things weren't okay.
Mm.
She felt as though she and the kids were walking on eggshells. They didn't want to. Let's not piss Steve off. Things could go bad, not
Mm.
in a violent sort of bad, but in a explosive anger kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but it all comes crashing down around you, and then you realize that a change has to be made, and some professional help needs to be sought. So that's what I did through, again, through the help of my community that I had just retired from. And I had actually moved
Mm.
to New York State at the time. My wife and I did, but we were able to reach back to our headquarters and actually get some help and get recommendations, get put in contact with the program that was going to help me out. And that was what
Steve,
we did.
do you feel like many SEALs do what you did? That it sounds like once you realized you needed to get support, that you did reach out. Do you feel like that's common?
I think it's more common now than it used to be.
Mm.
When when I was a new guy in the teams, I was basically raised by the Vietnam era SEALs, and at that point in time, they were just like the Korea era veterans and World War II era veterans, where you just didn't talk about it, and you just internalized all of that, and that was it, and you went on with
Mm.
life. What a lot of people don't understand or realize is that I've met people and I've talked to people that have said, yeah, my grandfather, he was a World War II veteran, stoic guy, fantastic individual, and he never talked about any of his experiences or about any trauma whatsoever, things like that.
Yeah.
And then I've watched interviews of these veterans that almost to the man, they have said, I've been struggling my entire life since the time I got out of the military. And because of my experiences, I've been struggling my entire life.
Oh,
And I wish the resources were available that, what the veterans have now.
yeah.
And so there's stoicism and then there's just packing it all down and just keeping it down, and it's not healthy for the human body.
Yeah.
It's not healthy at all for that. And not to mention, the psychology of everybody else around you. It's, there's the impact is enormous to family members and even friends. And
Mm.
if anybody ever feels that need that they need to reach out, swallow whatever pride you have and take advantage of it because it's going to open new doors in your personal relationships.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. It's suffering in silence. That's what the goal is of this podcast, of the book, because we know that there's so many that are still suffering in silence. And I think just even
Yeah,
using your resume, I think this is why I feel very grateful and appreciative of you, because you sharing your story that this is a real thing and that this is what you did. You took action. You had the courage to heal, basically, and got the support that you need or the tools, whatever that looked like for you. And I really do feel like other protector stories are empowering for those that are stuck and that are suffering in silence. And I would love to
very
just
much.
ask you, if somebody is listening to your story right now, and what would you advise them to do? What would be that first step of courage to healing?
First off, admit to yourself that there's a problem and there is no shame in that. Second, talk to a close friend, loved one, excuse me, a close friend or loved one that can help you find these resources. Because when we hit rock bottom, we don't we're not thinking clearly. We don't understand what's available, or sometimes, making that judgment call to find that resource. It's just not, it's not there. There's, and you and I have talked about this before about, people that are having suicidal ideations, that they're in a whole nother world. They're in a
Mhm.
different orbit from everybody else. And it's not clear thinking. It's not something that, oh, well, hey, I'll just call this, I'll call 988 and, talk to somebody. It's not as simple as that. It's not as easy as that. And I would encourage anybody that sees a friend or a, close relative or spouse that's struggling, with their mental, their mental health, their mental fitness, to help them find help and to help them reach out, even go with them to go meet with somebody, to go speak with someone. And, right now, if you try to make an appointment with a therapist that's non-emergency and you just want to get, a tune up on your mental health, that's 6 to 8 weeks out, if not 12
Mhm.
weeks out. Can we afford that amount of time? There's other resources that are out there. And just about every police department has a departmental psychologist. Same thing with firefighters and hospitals for the staff, people that are dealing with, watching death on a daily basis. Um, you know, those kind of things. They have people on staff now that deal specifically with those first responders, and the military has it as well.
Mm.
They are at least a, there's that crack in the doorway that you could go through to get that help. If they can't help you, make that breakthrough, or at least, kind of reel it back some, they can help you get to another resource. when when I was at SEAL Team 6, we had a command psychologist. And nobody ever went to go see the guy because you were afraid of what would happen. You were afraid of the repercussions of
Yeah.
the command finding out and you being taken off of, the roster, right? That was a certified fear. And I remember I ran into the command psychologist in the gym one day, and we're just BSing, and I always like to give the guy crap. And and he actually said something to me on a serious note. He said, "You know what? Because I've probably got the worst job in the command." He says, "I don't see anybody all day long because none of you guys want to come in and see me." And I'm like,
Oh,
"Well, no, we don't." Because, we don't want the repercussions of, what we say to you going to, the leadership, and then the leadership saying, "Wow, this guy needs some help. Let's take him out."
right. That's kind of a
Not that
real that's a
I never
reality?
saw that in anybody.
Oh.
Right,
Hmm.
right. Where now they actually have, you know, decompression stops, if you will, or guys go through these mental health evaluations, and it's non-attributable to your, unless there's something really, really out there and really wrong, um, with an individual. It's more of a tune-up. It's, kind of keeping the thumb on this, on this individual, and, the thumb on the finger on the pulse, and seeing, making sure that they're okay. And there's still, I think there's still a lot of people that don't go and talk to their command psychologist, which is fine as well. But later on down the road, there's going to be issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that we've definitely seen that from all the different stories. I mean, it's just human, isn't it? If you have a career that
Yeah.
you have, just like getting your broken leg fixed, you gotta get all the inside stuff, supported also. I mean, people are
Right.
human. And um, your story, I believe, is empowering people that are listening right now. And so Steve, I just want to thank you so much for having this conversation. I'm so grateful that you're part of this project. I'm grateful that your voice is going to help navigate those that are suffering in silence right now. So thank you so much for being part of this. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me on.